That'll do.
Alrighty, here we are in 2024. I don't know if you're ready. I know I'm not, but welcome, folks. Here we are with Andrew. How are you today, Andrew?
Pretty good, man. It's another year, another day.
Another dollar in the hole, right?
Yeah, man. Everything's
Well, did you have any fun on 2024 or the turning of the clock? Were you there and like, awesome, New Year?
No, I was asleep.
I think I was asleep too.
Yeah. At some point, we said we were going to do some kind of event, but then we ended up both falling asleep.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're an introverted pothead, and like you're like, well, we're doing this public thing, and like I really don't like doing public shit, but I don't want to do what I need to. Nah, I'm just gonna smoke a bowl.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I did too. I did that, and I think I made some good food that evening, and then I went to bed fairly early, 9:30 ish.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I kind of work myself ragged, so I just figured that holidays come around. That's my excuse to be lazy. Everybody else is busy. I can kind of run and hide for a little while.
Yeah, I get that way, and then the other time I'm like, everybody else is busy. Now's my chance, and I
Yeah.
start like working even harder because I know I have more space to work in. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't I'm not somebody who treats holidays like big events.
yeah,
I tend to try and spend the time with those I care about all the time, and I think because you never know, you can't wait for the next holiday to tell somebody you care for them with gifts
definitely.
and things like that.
Yeah, I've never been huge on holidays myself. I mean, the ones that I enjoy are more about the celebrating themselves than they are about, you know, it's about going
Right.
to hang out with people you care about. And
Yeah, like if somebody really likes doing birthday stuff and they want to have some big event for their birthday, then that's fun because they enjoy it. But
yeah,
like if it's just like, hey, here's a parade of the awesome stuff I do, come look at it with me,
yeah, yeah.
or
I
spend a bunch of money. Like I'm a cheapwad, man. I'll put my money into my business before I'll go spend, 400 bucks at the club. Not gonna happen.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm always thinking about, well, that could get me, 10 bags of grain, or I could get this or upgrade that. When you own your own business, it's always an uphill battle, man.
Right? Yeah. I don't know. I think like I was raised by an accountant, and so like he taught me, be really frugal with everything. And of course, I ignored that most of my life. But now, as I'm getting older, I start to listen and actually adhere to that stuff. Funny how that works.
Yeah, and I kind of, a long time ago, I don't want to say a spending problem. That's not a thing, but I just enjoyed spending money. And
Yeah.
now it's like, I don't want to say it's worse. It depends on how you look at it. It's better and it's worse. It's worse because I have a reason to spend money now on the business, but at the same time, I'm not spending a shit ton of money on video games, and you know,
Right.
it's all things that will help me in the long run.
Right. You just your priorities shift a little bit.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I'm still spending a good bit of money, but I'm also making money from that.
Right. That's balance. I've had to do some business growing, as you will. I've had to add in budgeting and like really strict budgeting, like weekly. Where it
Yeah,
used to be I could order a month or two's supplies in advance. Now it's like, no, you got to make sure that you have just what you need to fill this order and that order. And I think a lot of it is just everything's so expensive now.
yeah, yeah, it definitely is, and it's hard to even stay competitive, much less be a leader. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like when margins get the thinnest, that's when competition gets the heaviest.
Oh yeah, especially in a garage based competition. So, like, we have a lot of different levels. We do have big businesses in mycology, but like at the garage level, you have a bunch of folks that can undercut you on price. It's a secondary thing for them, or they're selling excess of what they've made themselves, and so it creates a unique market. And you really have to be competitive and have an edge. Be really good at what you're doing, or like I said, have some sort of edge.
Yeah, and that's kind of what me and my one of my gourmet partners have realized as well. Like, I don't want to say we went into things whole hog, but we went in thinking we would, go jump off a diving board and be in the middle of business. Well, now we're focusing more on trying to breed something unique so we can bring something to the table that other people literally can't.
Right.
Um, so you've always got to find that edge, that angle. There's always going to be an extra one that you can find.
So, do you want to talk about that at all, or is that super secret?
Which part with my gourmet
With
partner?
your, yeah, with what you're doing as far as hybridization and coming up with cool new things.
Oh well, the first big progress or project. Sorry, I can't talk today. Is I don't know if you've heard of the olive oysterling or the lake oyster.
I have, I think.
Yeah, we're gonna try to cross that with the common oyster, P. austerus, and try to get like as dark of coloration as we can on
Hmm,
a warmer fruiting oyster. So like a
nice.
black summer oyster is the goal. But we'll see how many permutations we have to go through before we reach that. You know as well as I that it's in there somewhere, but
Right. Yeah, who knows? I mean, like, I'm not a mathematician by any measure, but even a mathematician might have trouble figuring out the math on the various possibilities of genetics.
yeah. And that guy I mentioned, Julian Matitucci, uh, I'm not going to mention the project he's working on because I don't know how public it is yet. But he was like, "Yeah, I'm about to work on this project. I haven't decided if I'm going to do only 500 permutations or if I'm going to go ahead and do 1,000." And I was like, "What?"
Right. Imagine having that capacity. Like, wouldn't
Yeah,
that be nice?
and that's a single project.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Of
Like,
course, it's got to
it's
be
just
stressful too. I mean, it's hard
yeah.
enough for me running, a big day in the lab. So I can't imagine running 20 employees.
Well, and that kind of like it kind of like gave me a different perspective on some of these old heads because some of these people that are really really deep into the field that are doing the actual science, not necessarily just the band or anything like that. I kind of understand why they're getting frustrated with some of the people that are newer because they really do go the distance, so to speak.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like you with Agar. It'd be like the best comparison I've found so far is like a dude changing his oil and then walking up to a NASCAR attendant being like, "Yeah, we're mechanics, yeah." You
Right.
know what I mean? Like on some level, that person's worked most of their life to get to that skill level, so it's going to be frustrating if somebody's like cheating the system, so to speak.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I've kind of
I
got a
see.
new
I see what
perspective.
it's there's different levels of game, if you will, or different levels of mycology. There's your standard entry level where maybe I'll order a kid or buy a kid at the store, and all the way up to like we were talking earlier, mycologists, like
Yeah,
real uh, accredited mycologists that they do lots of stuff that some of us can't even comprehend half the time, or in some cases it's hard for them to explain it so everyone here can understand, because it is so technically complicated, and they're so intelligent that, like, it's like, hey man, this is how it works, it's breaking down at this level, and you're like, well, I don't know what four out of those five words mean. You know?
yeah, and and it's strange. Even a lot of the foraging experts, if you try to talk to them about like microscopic functions within fungi, they they have no clue. Like they can help you
Hmm.
identify just about anything, but as far as actual mycology, they're like, I don't know how any of this works.
Right. Well, I find it all very fascinating, and I think I wish I could understand all of the science for sure. But I think I also, when I listen to a lot of that stuff, I've just learned to kind of shut my mind off when I've got the information out I can, and then the rest is like, well, that's really useful information, but I don't have the corresponding information to go with it,
Yeah,
like to put it into use necessarily.
yeah, and there's always going to be people different levels doing different stuff, and all of it, all of it helps really. All of it's different
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
I've wanted to have a really smart team of folks to give me information. Like teach me, because that's how I learn. I don't learn via reading or going to school as well. I kind of phased
yeah,
myself out of that. Learned a lot from reading text, which is really weird. That you essentially are reading a recipe, like a cookie recipe, but for mycology, and learn from it.
yeah. I would say though, you already have a fairly good grasp of the systems themselves. Like even if you're not talking about hyphal knot swarming and stuff like that, you know what to do to make things grow correctly. You know what I mean? Like you're
Right.
more experienced than 90% of the people that I know, and there at a certain point, as long as you understand the systems, it's kind of like being able to fix a car without knowing what the parts are called. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Instinctual, hey, maybe my ancestor ate a bunch of mushrooms, and when I was in the womb I saw all the mycelial memories.
Maybe, dude. Have you seen any of those new Resident Evil games?
I don't think so. Are they kind of fungus based or what?
Yeah, the bad guy is like this mold that possesses people.
Oh no.
And
Oh, I mean, I guess it makes sense. It's a new unknown that we're kind of
yeah,
this landscape we're discovering now.
there's like a church of the mega mycete is what they call it. It's
Hmm.
pretty funny if you ask
Yeah,
me.
you probably start looking, you might find some real churches like that right now. I mean, there's the pot one, the cannabis cult. I can't remember what it was called. It was something
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
Church of Ganja.
One started here too as well. It was a mushroom one started here, and we were really worried about them for a little while. We were kind of like, man, they're like giving people drugs and brainwashing them, and so we kind of had some people look into it. Like, I'm not going to say any of the people involved, but after they went to look into it, they found out that it's just a bunch of people wanting to trip, and if they say
Hmm.
it's religion, then it's a lot harder to come after them legally.
Right.
So that was their whole thing. None of them were like in there like mushroom, mushroom, like
They weren't really praising, but hey,
yeah,
maybe eventually that'll happen. I
yeah.
don't know how
I
this
wouldn't be
stuff works.
surprised at all. It's a wild world
Well,
we live in, man.
I mean, as far as like organisms that have been on this earth, I mean, it is pretty close to the a godlike status. It's been around since the beginning. Can't say that about any other
Yeah,
creatures too much that I know of. Of
yeah.
course, I'm not a genius, so I don't know.
We get questions all the time of people being like, "How do I get rid of these mushrooms?" And we're like, "You're not. You're not
Yeah,
gonna."
yeah. Well, do you ever want anything to grow there ever again? Because pretty much the only way is to just ensure nothing will ever grow there
Scorch
again,
the earth,
and
essentially.
even then, it will probably find a way.
Yeah, it'll grow instead of growing straight up through that dead earth. It'll grow to the side and then grow up.
Yeah, I mean, like, are there magic mushrooms in Chernobyl? Like, I mean, are they like super duper magic now?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know.
I know that they were talking about the fungus was helping to break down the radioactivity faster than they believe, but the
That would
animals are all weird. Like,
Yeah, and they have a portion of the forest that at night glows red.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I like that.
I don't like it either. I want to take a picture of it, but I don't want to get close enough to take a picture of it.
Right.
You feel
Sounds
me?
suspiciously like a portal to hell.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's nah, that's a no for me.
I think what I had seen was I was watching one of those fishing shows, and there's like these just giant Wells catfish in the channels, the old cooling ducks in there,
Oh
and
yeah.
they were allowed to go in there for however long to try and fish for them. Pretty darn cool.
Speaking of some of those catfish, like what it might have been a whale's catfish. I'm not sure if are they. They're in the United States, right?
They may be now, but they're mainly overseas in like Britain, Europe, that corner of the world.
Did you hear about the thing at the Hoover Dam?
I don't think so. What happened there?
Oh, so something was messed up in the water channels at the Hoover Dam, so they had to send divers down. And they said a diver went down, came up less than 10 minutes later, said there's something swimming down there bigger than a Volkswagen bug, and immediately quit his job. He was like, "No, I'm fucking good. That thing could have swallowed me whole. I'm good." And he like just quit.
Yeah,
And
maybe somebody put some in there because that sounds like it.
yeah, if I thought of any fish that was like bulky like that, built like a tank, it's definitely some kind of catfish.
Yeah, yeah, and they'd eat you too. I mean, if you fit in their
Yeah.
mouth,
Oh
put
yeah.
their mouth around you.
Uh, do you know about sturgeon?
Oh yeah, we actually have quite a few up here,
We have
giants.
we have lake sturgeon that get 13 feet here.
Yeah, that's
Um,
giant,
they can
man. Those things are just they taste really good too.
they can swim up our dam.
Oh yeah, yeah. Do you have a like a window in the dam? Can you go and see them when they go past the fish ladder?
No, but no. You if you go anywhere near the dam, you'll be charged with terrorist stuff.
Oh, okay.
But no, but we originally they're lake sturgeon, and if you swim up the dam, you can get to the river, and then that exact same river runs by my house,
Hmm.
and we find them in that river all the time.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Are you
oh
allowed to fish for them there?
no, we totally don't because it's against the law, and we are
Right.
respectful citizens, and we never ever do any illegal wildlife hunting ever.
Right. I'm the same way. Now, we have so much here. I'll have to send you a sample, and you can tell me if it's on par. I don't know. We have white sturgeon
Mm,
here. I think I don't know if they go all the way into the ocean, but they're really big. Same
yeah.
size. We're allowed to catch this really narrow size range. It's like 5'8" to 6'4".
Mm.
Yeah, it's just this, and it's the age range, I guess,
Oh, okay.
because they can live so long.
So they probably already laid eggs past. They probably already
Yeah,
reproduced.
I'm not sure why. It's probably just a stage that they're at for a short amount of time, and so that by catching those ones, they only reduce the population by a set amount of fish. But it's like everything else. They're all over. This area here where I live is I guess I don't know if you'd call it a floodplain or what you'd call it. It's where the glaciers came through, the great big glaciers, and carved out these valleys. And so you've got these little pockets of water, like rivers and lakes and ponds, and they're all created at the same time. And like some of them have sturgeon in them. There's this one little hole in Salem. It's a gravel pit, and it
Mm.
flooded in like the 30s or 40s, and apparently sturgeon got in there, and it's tiny. It's like 2 acres, maybe a 2 acre pond, but it goes straight down. And there was a guy fishing in there, and I think early 2000s, 2002 or something like that, and he caught a great big one, like a 8 footer, out of this little tiny pond.
It's wild, dude.
I mean, you could skip rocks across this pond, dude, and you would never ever think that there was anything in there, but it's like 90 feet deep.
My only interaction with them, and if he ever sees this, he's going to kill me for mentioning this. But my best friend, we used to go across logs that were laying across the creek, and he fell directly onto one of them, like
Oh
literally
well.
almost on its back. I mean, it was slightly underwater, but all of a sudden I just see him come back up out of the water. There's a fucking monster! Like, no thinking it was a fish, nothing. We both, like, even out of the water, we hauled ass back to the
Took a
house.
lasso to that thing and ride it up the river.
It was, well, that's the thing, man. And I don't know about the north. Maybe that does happen in the north, but in the south, if something like weird happens in the woods, you leave it the fuck alone. You don't.
Yeah. I don't know. We've got two schools of people. There's people that will go directly to the weird thing, and that's your what do they call that? Natural selection.
Yeah.
And then there's the people. They're like, I'll just walk away. Me, I am very fortunate that I haven't naturally been selected because I typically do go towards dangerous things. I don't know why.
Yeah, and okay, let me rephrase my previous statements. If you hear a bear, that's fine. If you hear any other animal, that's fine. If you hear
A
something that makes you
laughing
go,
doll.
yeah, 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 like something laughing, or if you hear something that genuinely makes you go, what the fuck was that? Like
Yeah.
something you have no explanation for, you'll know how long somebody's been in the South because they'll hear something like that. They'll be like, not my fucking business, and just keep walking. Like,
You ever heard the calls they use to try and get Sasquatch, like to respond? It's like a primate call. I
yeah,
was out camping at this caldera one time, a really small one, and it's in the middle of nowhere. And
yeah.
we're just out there in the middle of the night, and you just hear something just like that. But I knew like there was a road. There's somebody could have easily pulled up to the top of this caldera area and
Mm-hmm.
and just yelled out of their car, and you could hear them for miles because of the shape of it. So I just kind of naturally assumed it was somebody trying to creep us out, but like there was nobody up there, so I don't know.
Yeah, there's been a couple of things that have creeped me out more than others, but I haven't had any experiences semi lately. I haven't been going out as much, to be completely honest.
Same here. Stuck inside working and don't have the dough to go out and have fun as much.
It gets expensive after a while, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know. I right before I moved out here, I traded in my Toyota Tacoma for my great big Dodge Ram, and now I get about 10 to 12 miles a gallon on a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't make for a cheap date, so to speak. I want to go out and have a day in the woods. I got to spend $50 to $60 in gas.
Yeah, right now I'm sharing a Honda, and it's okay gas mileage, but sharing a car is
Right.
it's got its own caveats.
Yeah, hard to schedule things, and you don't want to interrupt the other person's schedule either. So.
Yeah, which I tend to end up doing sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of that is our society these days is tended towards independence, and so when we feel like we have to rely on other people, it's hard. But we're moving into a time where we absolutely are going to have to rely on each other, and so people like you and I, maybe we'll be successful as a result of it.
Being able to communicate with others better, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and being able to interact with them and not step on their toes. That's
You
hard
got
to
to be
do
able to
these
do
days.
that in our community for sure, man.
Well, you just never know what mental state somebody else is in. They may
That's
be
true.
stressed out and full of anxiety and read a comment that you intended as being a compliment, and
or
see
even
it
a
as an
negative.
insult. And it's just so hard to know with written words what someone's intent and tone was.
Yeah, and that goes both ways though. There are assholes that use that to their advantage as well.
Yes, yes, and I've done it too. Like I'll get in a shitty mood, and I'll go and respond to somebody and intentionally bait them, with something like that, and then every once in a while you get called out and realize that, hey, wait, I'm stressing out online, and I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I got lucky on what I stressed out about because the person I ended up actually stressing out on was Madden.
Oh
And
yeah.
luckily, he's a very understanding person. And afterwards, he was kind of like, okay, what is this, bud? This is not the way you usually act. And I got it sorted. So I got lucky there. Um, I've never had a reason to actually get upset with you, so I don't know what that's
Right.
like.
I've scared a few people off, man. Just and I try to learn from those instances. So it happens to everybody. Like say it's written word, and I've never been good at it as far as like work correspondence, emails. Like I'll send emails at work, and man, yeah, that I had some people mad at me. Like, no, I'm just trying to help you do your job better. It's not my fault you suck.
Yeah, that happened to me a lot with when I was still doing graphic design and stuff. I've been
What
doing
kind of grain are you got in those jars there?
this is pure oats. It's not my favorite, but it is reliable. It's old reliable. If you're worried about running a project, I recommend running on oats.
Yeah. What kind of do they tell you what kind of oats there? I think I don't know that we have any difference here. I know that we have like different kinds of millet. There's white millet and red millet,
My favorite
and I
my
guess it's
favorite
red Milo.
mixture is uh, a little bit of Milo, not Milo, no, bird seed and oats, honestly. But it's hard because the bird seed doesn't have the same, what's the word?
Like
It has
density, maybe.
it has different hydration requirements than the oats. So it's like
Yeah,
if you boil them together, then the birdseed overhydrates. But if you
yeah. That's
don't,
that's what I learned too. It's interesting that you do that because that's what I did when I ran grain is 30% millet to oats, and it just kind of makes up for that. I don't know what you want to call it, the hole on the oats that doesn't really have a lot of nutrition. The millet tends to run off nutritious liquid that fills the oats, and then because it's that unique little size variance, you got a little round guy and a little oblong guy. They pack together better and fill in all those empty spaces. I
maximum
really love
surface
it.
area.
Yeah, exactly. Best of both worlds. You get the long term core growth of the oats, and you get the quick burnout of the millet. And
I,
that's what's available here, and so it worked really well on my end.
I even had somebody telling me that like saprobic fungi, they put a tiny bit of master's mix in with their grain.
Oh, nice.
So,
Yeah, I've heard that essentially, if you go from start to finish, like from agar to LC to grain, using like the grain water or some
mhm.
portion of it, that it naturalizes the food source, and when you get to the very end of it, it doesn't have as long of a transition time. It doesn't really shock when you transfer it. It's like, oh hey, I know this food source.
Yeah, and that works for a little while, but you got to be careful because you'll real quick get into senescence if you do
Right.
that over too many.
That's what I heard too, but I've not got into the science too far, but to know how much of it affects what we do on our end, especially with
Oh,
as much genetic isolation as we do, whether or not that has an effect on that as well.
I would imagine that it does somewhat, but a lot of the person I was talking to who was doing nutrient training, he said that you had to go to spore a couple of times before. I mean, you'll get results before going to spore, but if you go and train it about 3 generations, was what he was doing somehow, it will naturally want to take to that. And
Oh,
he was doing that somehow without it undergoing senescence. I imagine just taking new clones each generation after starting from spore.
right.
Um, but yeah, it was an interesting little process. That guy's an interesting cultivator. Maybe I could get him on. That would be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good transition for us too. I think with the new year, and I think we'll call it a new season of our podcast.
Yeah.
Where would you like to see it go? And what is your idea? Because I've been pretty vocal. I hardly ever shut up. Uh, but I'd definitely be interested to hear where you'd like to see it go.
um, well, you and I have talked a long time about the divide between the community, the kind of newcomers and the old heads. I kind of want to I want to try, if I can, I want to try to bridge those two groups a little bit. I want to get people in communication because, you know, the only way we're going to make progress is trying new things, but also experience. It can help a lot. So I honestly, if there's some way that we can bring more people together that work on these projects from different backgrounds, maybe we'll actually help the science further along.
Right. Well, and we have differing levels of. I don't know if you want to call it intelligence. It's not. I wouldn't say intelligence. Education, we'll say,
Yeah.
and so you're of a higher education level than I am, or at least I feel you are, and so it gives us that opportunity to bridge that gap. You get some super duper smart people that you look up to in there that you can maybe break down the science into stuff I can understand, and we can trickle it down into nearly layman's understanding, because you know how I like to do things. I just like to simplify the hell out of it.
Yeah, man. It's it's so have you heard the concept of the glass ceiling when it comes to like celebrities that eventually they hit
I
like a
have. I don't know that I understand, the what they're referencing as far as the literal glass ceiling, but
it's like you got to break through multiple levels to become a celebrity. So like you got to become famous locally, and then you got to become famous here, and then
okay.
eventually
So
you're
it's like you think this is your cap, but it's not. It's
exactly.
just a false barrier, essentially.
And mycology is so much like that. It's insane. Like I kind of recently broke through one of those ceilings, and I started hanging out with people that actually do collect species and are finding some newer species that aren't cataloged yet. And I went from like, yes, I know what I'm talking about, to what's going on, what's happening.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It's like you say, there's just so much to know, and the science is new. So not only is there so much to learn already, but every day there's more being created, and it's not easy for somebody that that say just wants to grow a couple bags on their counter to comprehend everything out there. And even for somebody like me, it's hard to stay on top of things. I have not done like you. I need to keep getting into those circles of people that challenge me more. And I think, at least for me, part of my hesitation has always been the competition in the myco community, and vendors don't like to pair up with doing the same thing. Like, you don't see genetics vendors with genetics vendors with genetic vendors, because they will all duplicate everything and nobody will make much money.
Yeah.
Same with what I do and agar. But we should be having groups where they're just the vendors talking, and brainstorming, like, hey, this is what you can do to improve your your own setup. And I know there are some groups like that, especially in gourmet growing. But in the medicinal side of things, in our active side of things, there's a lot more standoffishness, a lot more. This is my stuff. This is how This is how I decided we'd do it. Instead of like, hey, I learned this stuff. You can take what you want from it and gain your own perspective.
Yeah, and I think that there's like a lot of people see people like Wombat and James Cruz or whoever you want to say, Nikki Miko, and they say, "Oh, these people are really cool. I want to make a name for myself too." And it
Right.
becomes like a I want to leave a legacy thing
Right.
when you know
Competition.
exactly when really a lot of the people that want to leave a legacy they haven't put in the work, like genuinely
Right.
they just haven't. And then you have the real people and it just becomes a fight like all over again.
Right. Well, and I think like there are the glass ceilings, as you talked about. There's various levels of like mycology learning where you have to fail so many times before you reach this okay, I've endured all of the hardships. I'm going to stick at this, And I think you get into those people that have been around 4 or 5 years, and they've been through enough stuff that they're like, all right, I know I can endure all these hardships, and it's hard to imagine someone new looking forward so positively as being able to handle those things, and uh, there's just so many things that you can run into in mycology that will set you back and send you to the hills running. Contamination sounds like one thing, but it's 100 things.
Yeah, yeah. And even I was somewhat experienced when I came back to my ecology. Like I didn't have perfect sterile tech, and I was still using a still air box when I first came back to it. But I still, for a while I struggled when I first came back to it. It was hard. It took me. I'm probably maybe in the past 8 months gotten comfortable again. I guess is the right way to put it because all of my tests have come back positive. I've been doing all right, but that's
Yeah.
set you up perfect for a big fuck up.
Right. Well, it's kind of like what people say about messing up in life. You can get things right 100 times. That one time you screw up is where people are going to remember, and you remember it, and you beat yourself up for it sometimes. And I think that's what causes people to drop out and fail and not keep going in mycology.
Yeah, that and just like even I was talking to somebody. I'm not going to say who because I'm not a name dropper or whatever you want to call it. But I was talking to somebody and I was like, "Have you considered getting your hybrids tested?" And this person that I really do respect, who I talk to fairly often, kind of exploded on me a little bit. Like they were
Hmm.
like, "Why should I do this? Why should I do that?" And I talked to him about it, and I was like, "Well, show everybody that there's new talent in town, man. If this is
Yeah.
for
Stick it
real,
out.
go for it." And I kind of talked to him a little bit about it. He's like, "You know what? I am going to get it tested. I am going to send it off for ITS and that kind
Right.
of thing." It's I'm genuinely, if you can't tell how much I'm harping on it, I'm genuinely kind of sad about the miscommunication going on in the community because there's so much missed potential. I mean, it's
Oh
kind of like
yeah.
you were saying with Edward Grand. It's like he's brilliant. He really is brilliant. His work's great, but he has an attitude no one wants to listen to. And when you're like that, you could literally be like Batman. No one
Yeah.
cares. No one
Well, and
cares.
that's got to be hard too. Honestly, I have not seen a lot from it other than the comments and whatnot. We kind of talked. He seemed okay to me, but I haven't interacted. I haven't watched him on any of those shows. But I think, I think what we run into is there's a lot of I don't know what you really want to call it. I don't want to call it hate because that's not the right word. It's we see these things that people do wrong all the time. And there's common how to's that tell you how to do things that we would call wrong. Now, there are ways that work, but they're not doing it in a reliable, repeatable manner, like sport of grain. Everybody harps on that. And if you see someone saying, hey, look how awesome I'm doing at this, they will immediately say, hey, you can't do that, and it shuts them down. And it's the same with all different things. I think across mycology where there's triggers. I guess that's the word I was looking for. Triggers
Yeah.
where people will say certain things, much like you with like honey mushrooms. Somebody asks you, "Is this chaga? Is this a honey mushroom?"
Yeah.
Immediately you're like, "Damn it, I don't want to talk about this shit." And
Yeah.
there's things like that in mycology, and I think, at least in my opinion, that's one of the points we need to change, is that when you see something like that, instead of jumping on somebody and being like, hey, the fuck are you thinking? You need to be like, hey, man, I know that like you see this all over. We've all done it. We all started there. Like, here's some good info. Just read this stuff. Draw your own conclusion. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but you should really read this shit. You
Yeah.
know, but it's so much fun on social media to poke at others. I don't know that it's mycology as much as it is social media.
Yeah. Social media has kind of gamified a lot of things, even conversation, like turned it into a game, like every little thing getting likes or, you know,
Right.
what have you.
Yeah, and I tend to take it a lot more seriously. Like, I mean, you've seen the same thing I have. People dying left and right. It is
Yeah.
not like
It's like,
nothing's happening here. People don't just die from overdose; they die from killing themselves. And I tend to think that when I see somebody on here that they're here to heal, which means there's a percentage chance that they're on that track to where they might be going downhill. So to me, I don't think it's worth it to say things like that, to interject and to make my opinion more valuable than keeping them in the game. I kind of think I think that shuts a lot of people out. I know that it about shut me out. That's where I developed that opinion. Was I got shut down because I did the same thing every noob does and tried things years ago, and people are like, "Oh, you doing? You're stupid. Oh, you can't do. You're wrong. Oh, you're what's wrong with mycology." Things like that, and it's just like you don't understand the gravity of your statements at the time. You don't know where someone's headspace is, and so to me, I always walk into all of those situations, or try to, thinking about what if they're in the worst mental state? What can I say that will avoid making them think that I think they're silly or wrong, and how can I help them to get the medicine they need to survive? And it's a hard
yeah.
mentality to adapt all the time.
Yeah. And I think a lot of, like, not just in the mycology community, but worldwide, we've forgotten kind of how to do that for people. You know what I mean? It's been hard lately, and a lot of people have just been in survival mode,
Yeah.
and we
Treat
tend to,
yourself.
yeah, and then we end up being weaker individually than we are together, and it just makes a
Yeah.
different mess.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've seen it with my family. Like, I thought, well, I've got all this support and everything, and well, shit hits the fan, and you realize that maybe 1 in 5 of those people you thought you could count on, and you all of a sudden realize the value of family and the value of those people that put not necessarily family, but those connections, primary in their life over themselves, because at least for me, that's where meaning comes from. I could buy a bunch of shit and I can show people a bunch of shit and they'll be like, cool for a day. But make a friend, and you treat them right, you got somebody there for life.
Yeah, one of my newer friends, I've mentioned Brandon to you a couple of times, hadn't I?
I think so. I don't know who it is, but
This dude, he okay. First of all, he's one of the best identifiers that's out there. Period. Any
oh
mushroom.
yeah, the
Every once in a while,
guru.
Yeah, but this dude, not only that, he has like 8 reptiles. He between him and his wife, he has 6 children. He is a engine mechanic. I don't even know the proper terminology for his position, but this dude used to build like $300,000 cars.
Oh
Like
yeah.
he stays constantly busy, and somehow the dude takes time to talk to me every single day. You know what I mean? It's just those bonds you're talking about. When people choose to be your friend, they'll make time and they'll make,
Yeah.
even if they're as busy as Brandon. Brandon stays busy as fuck. He's probably busy right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's that's another thing that's easy to get on the wrong side of, and I've found myself doing of late with just being in a shitty mood in my own life, and it's easy to glaze over people wanting to talk and to needing to talk. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that need to talk these days.
Yeah, man. Yeah, sometimes those people don't even realize they need to.
Yeah,
It's
for
like,
sure.
whew.
Took me a long time to figure it out. I used to think like everybody else, you just keep it inside and you just be stronger, get more mad and you can figure that out. And then my mom passed, or what rather, my mom got sick, and I got to take care of her for a long time. And before she passed, we came to this conclusion, like there's no point in having these weird, stupid, false barriers like modesty, like talking conversation wise, like
Yeah,
holding things back that are stupid and silly, like what you do in your spare time that you think someone will disapprove of, but you've never actually had them disapprove of.
yeah,
And so I think that was, a different something that changed me to see perspective from other people. But not everybody's has that same encounter. A lot of people bottle up and do the opposite.
yeah. And I think it's a thing for a lot of people. You kind of have to have that moment. You know what I mean? Like you have to have like the moment you had with your mom. You have to have something like reach you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not, you can't be like, well, this is how this happened for me, so now you should feel this way. It's you have to find that person has to find their moment that's really going to speak to them. And I've seen it in a lot of different people, a lot of different ways. You'll hear uh, recovering addicts will talk about the moment, you know, that they
Right.
knew they had to stop or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of relate it to our mushroom trips, and I think that's why it works so well. It's so very similar to those revelatory moments. You can take your psychedelic mushrooms and see past the BS and the BS that you put in your own mind to prevent yourself from seeing what you're actually about. There's a lot of people out there that think they're being real, and then they realize they're lying to themselves somewhere somehow. And it can be as simple as it was for like me, where uh, I was basing a lot of how I lived my life off of what other people said I should be afraid of, instead of actually looking at what I was afraid of and avoiding those things. And it really just makes you think, like, why would I be afraid of this thing? Like, I'm literally sitting here and, this thing that other people said could harm me. I know that it will harm me. In fact, I have to, something comes up to me right now, it might want to watch the fuck out.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I've had a couple of moments like that as well, where a lot of times fear is based in misunderstanding, and that's pretty
Yeah.
much it, man.
Conception and myth. Well, we kind of veered off from where what we want to do with the show. So did we miss anything? Like, how do you like the format? Like, I know I've always talked about just trying to kind of relax and
Yeah,
feel like this. Like me and you were just kind of BSing right now, but I don't know how to convey that to our guests so well.
I definitely like this better. I like being able to get up like not feeling nervous about unloading my jars, that definitely felt like a step in the right direction for me. I just kind of went with the flow. Um, Somebody said something to me, like somebody that knows me personally, and they said, "Hey, I watched your podcast. You weren't really acting like yourself." And I was like, "Shit." They were like, "You seemed kind of uptight, like somebody was in the room that you didn't want to say something bad in front of." I was like,
Yeah. Well, we're a young show, like it's kind of like probably like being in a new school. You're like at first you're kind of like, all right, I got to feel the waters out here. Can I actually be my crazy self? Or do I kind of have to be this idea of what people want me to be? And I think I figured out how to be myself on air a while back. It's just getting comfortable now with the cameras and
Yeah, that's probably the harder part for me. If somebody was actually in the room with me or something, it'd be a little more loosey goosey. But I'm getting more used to it as time goes by, and you know it's something you gotta adjust to.
right. You just gotta, I think, see it as you and me talking, and like this doing episodes like this I think help because I can focus on it. And I have been the same mind as you, where when we get folks on here it's too much like an interview.
Yeah,
And so maybe we just figured out we sit down early on and get 20 minutes ahead of time and just BS with them. The problem I've seen in the past is that what happens during those sessions is stuff we should be recording. Uh,
yeah,
it's all great stuff. Like, I mean, if you folks, if you saw or heard some of the science and cool stuff people talk about before we go on air, and all that nervousness comes in, like I'm like every time I'm like, damn it, I should have just recorded this crap and told him it wasn't recording.
yeah. And then it's either that happens or we completely forget to record, and we get like 40 minutes
Yeah.
in, and we're like, "Shit."
Yeah, I know, man. Well, it's not like there's this giant red thing in the corner that says recording or anything.
To be fair though, I was looking right at it too, and I didn't say a word, like nothing.
Oh, it's the best show that never got recorded.
We were like, I guess we'll do 30 minutes now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not down for a full hour. We got 30 minutes left.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think we need to interview more people that just need to be relaxed about stuff. Maybe what's I'm trying to find the right words. Uh, Maybe it'd be more personal and less about the advertising of the people we bring on. You know what
right.
I
I was
mean?
kind of thinking the same thing, that like initially our format is what do you do?
Yeah,
What projects are you working on? And that's the same as what everybody else does. And that's kind of always been my thought, is I've never been somebody that does what people expect me to or what everybody else does. Like I don't. If everybody was in line to get $1 million, I probably would go down and dig a hole somewhere because
yeah,
I'm just that hard headed. I don't know why, but I think at least here with this show, I would just really like to see us get some good people on that are relaxed, like you say, and we sit and BS and we talk about what they do, but I think maybe we learn about them a little bit more, and then we can just naturally kind of bring it up, like you say. We sit down, talk with them, and see
yeah.
where it goes from there.
Learn a little bit about them because I'm sure there's still plenty of stuff that you and I don't know about in the mycology world. It's
Right.
such an expansive topic.
Well, I can tell you originally my thoughts were that there's lots of educational podcasts out there. There's lots of good myco podcasts out there where they do how to's and techs, and I've just always wanted to kind of sit down and show people that those folks that are the OGs or the big myco heads, that they're people like you and me. They're busybodies. They do a lot, but in reality, when you sit down and you listen to them and you hear about them going out in the woods as kids, same as you, or going fishing, or taking their kid out, and how they have a life outside of this. And I think it helps to relate. I think we look at all these different social media platforms, and it's easy to idolize people because we only put forth our best face, and
Yeah.
there's so much more to people out there. And I think there's a lot of people that are very popular with very little depth. And there are some people that are very unpopular that probably have some real depth. And the reason that they are unpopular is because they don't focus on being popular. They focus on doing good things, or what they feel
Yeah.
is right, and there's a lot of people that see that and kind of ignore it and say, well, I see things you're doing as wrong, so I don't agree with you, and
Yeah, it's a lot of back and forth, man. Always has been.
yeah.
And it'll
No,
stay like that. It's fine, but I do agree that I think the show could definitely humanize some people, kind of
yeah,
remove the hero worship a little bit. Because in the end, it's people's work that you like. You don't really know them as a person. You know what I mean? Like, I can talk all day about Dave Wombat did this and that, but what I know from him about him personally is from Facebook posts. It's here's this
right,
animal I have. That's pretty much what I know about him personally. Um, so I think people should keep that in mind as well. Like, it's
right.
it's their work you're really into.
Yeah, well, there's I think there's a couple sides to it. I think there is the work, but I think there's folks also that just they want to follow someone. They
Yeah.
want to have that person that's larger than life, and uh, that they can say, well, I talk to this person all the time. you know they have the evidence they're a normal person because they talk to them all the time, but they also idolize them. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I'm sure there's some psychology there that I have no idea. I'm on the other end of that psychological conversation, typically, not the one asking questions but answering.
People follow me around too much, they get the mallet.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's not big enough. You need a bigger one.
Oh, this is first time offenders.
Oh yeah, you got the Donkey Kong size one.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, I always figured it had to be a rubber mallet. That's why it bounces up and down so fast, right?
Yeah, dude. Now I want to play Donkey Kong. I haven't played that in a
Yeah, what did I watch? I watched the Mario Brothers the other day. The
while.
live action Mario Brothers.
Wait, the one with the real people or the animated one?
I'm pretty sure it's real people.
Like the older one?
Which one? I think it was real people. I don't know. That was up late on mushrooms. Maybe it wasn't real people.
uh, the newest one that came out, a lot of people are upset about because the voice actor for Mario has been the same dude for like 46 years.
It's a me, a Mario.
Yeah, exactly. That dude. Wahoo! That
Yep.
dude. And they didn't have him do the movie.
Right. And wasn't it
Chris Pratt.
yeah. Yeah, I remember the controversy over it. Yeah, nope, I was definitely on a trip that night because that was the one I watched.
I think they were real people. I feel you.
Yeah, I think so.
That must have been a good one, man.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I know I fell asleep halfway through it and then woke up and watched the second half. So it
that
was
whole
different.
the whole movie, the only thing I watched it for was Jack Black being Bowser.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because now I remember the Peaches song.
Yeah, that's that's a pretty good one. You'll hear if around my house sometimes you'll hear me singing that one early in the morning.
I was actually disappointed that it was just a clip of him, like in the movie. I thought maybe he actually sang a whole song like that. Nope, it's just a short version.
He has a music video where like he's dressed up in a suit and it's Bowser's colors and stuff on the suit. and he does a whole music video, which is pretty good. But yeah, mushrooms. Mario. Mario has mushrooms. We're still on topic.
There you go. I don't know about Jack Black. He probably takes lots of mushrooms.
Yeah. What was it? What was that movie? Uh, Tenacious D. He
Oh, in the
finds
Pick of Destiny.
Yeah, he finds the mushrooms in the woods, and then he's like thinks that Sasquatch is his mama.
I'll have to rewatch that. It's been a while. I don't remember that part. I just remember the battle with the devil.
Yeah, he like stops being friends with his buddy. Him and his friend like goes. He's like, I don't need to eat at that diner. I have some tasty mushrooms on the ground right here. Just it's pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's never ended well, right? Let's just eat some random mushrooms.
Oh, that's one other thing we should talk about. Did you hear about that one man? What happened to that one guy recently?
Somebody ate some good ones, huh?
Yeah, some death caps. Um, he ate some death caps because a plant identification app said that they were puffballs.
Wow. Yeah, and
Yeah,
see that kind of relates to exactly what we were talking about earlier with identification. Like there's no similar characteristics. Like, I mean, yes, there are stemmed puffballs, but like,
yeah. There was a whole big discussion amongst my little group, and they were like, "Well, what do you have to say about this?" And of course, I guess I was kind of the asshole in the situation because I was like, "It's his fucking fault. He's a fucking idiot." They were like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "He went into a situation unprepared. You do that with anything, it's dangerous. Literally
all right. Well,
anything."
you know that out of the thousands of mushroom species we see on a daily basis, a very small fraction is edible, or what we consider edible.
Yeah, well, yeah, choice edible. There's a whole lot that are edible, like tree
Right.
bark is edible, but it's like why?
Right. Yeah. Maybe there's a better word for it. You know, I was thinking palatable, but that's not it either. That
It's
just
pretty
means it
close.
tastes good.
I would say palatable.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the real narrow scope.
Yeah, because you get like technically schizophilum commune, that split gill that you and I discussed. That's edible, but if you've ever put any in your mouth, it's like they call it.
Well, like turkey tail, you know. I
It's
don't know that you'd
worse.
want to chew on turkey tail.
Yeah, I don't. Dude, I really do love mushrooms, but I don't understand. Like, I went to the mushroom festival and people came up, they're like, "This is reishi tea," and I have a friend that's a deadhead. He's like 65, and I was trying to be polite, so I took a sip. And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, it's pretty good." He goes, "Tastes like dirt."
Yeah. Tastes like mushroom spores.
Yeah, but I just can't get into the. I got into mushrooms to cook with them to expand my ingredient list, not restrict. You know.
Right, focus. You're not like, I want to cook everything mushroom. No, it's like that's another ingredient to add to my arsenal.
Yeah, man. There's a lot of vegans in the mushroom world. A lot.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, there's a lot of mushrooms that have a consistency that can substitute meat, which is pretty funny, honestly, because to me, a true vegan would relish the taste and consistency of those vegetables, right? Not
Yeah.
not
You're,
make everything meat like.
you're gonna get me. You're gonna get me on a soapbox.
Nah, you know, I know some really intelligent and good vegans. You know, I think it's all about how you treat it.
Yeah, just like anything else. Yeah, I do know some that are okay.
I used to be a strict carnivore. Like people would tell me, like, "Hey, I'm a vegetarian." I'm like, "Yeah, all I eat is meat, no vegetables."
I'm definitely an omnivore, but I can't. I don't know. I like food too much, man. I really just enjoy eating, and I can't imagine like cutting anything out of my diet, really, because it's like not too long ago, dude. I had stuffed cuttlefish.
Interesting.
Like,
Never had cuttlefish.
it's pretty good when you shove peppers and rice inside of it. Um,
Was it whole? I mean,
yeah, it was pretty whole. We got it at the Atlanta Farmers Market, and they have like you can buy like shark meat there.
hmm, interesting.
There's a lot of crazy stuff out there. Fresh calamari, you can get imported fish, all kinds of stuff. But it's always a mess to get in there. Like you're going to be surrounded by people the entire time, and if you don't go at 7 a.m., all the good shit's going to be gone.
Right. Yeah, I mean, who wants to go when you know the fish has been sitting out for 6 or 8 hours? No, they're gonna go when it's cool in the morning, get the good ones, and eat
Yeah,
that.
man.
Yeah,
You
we're
get the
kind of spoiled here, but because we live on the coast, we don't get a lot of the imported stuff. We just get the stuff that they catch locally.
yeah,
But I mean, I can go pick up Dungeness crab for like 250 a pound.
yeah, and we're in that weird zone because the coast, like I could be in Savannah in 3 hours, like right there on the side of Georgia. But at the same time, got to ship it, got to process it. So by the time it gets to us, it's still. So I could go to Savannah and buy a shit ton of crab for about that price. But if I'm buying it 3 hours away here, it's still fairly expensive.
Right. Do you guys have the river crabs there?
We have crayfish more than anything, and we have both terrestrial crayfish and river dwelling crayfish as
Oh,
well.
that's cool. Yeah, we don't have the terrestrials here, but I actually have seen people advertising kits for growing them here because we have all this flat floodplain area, and
Mhm.
that's pretty much all you do is you lay the eggs out, I guess, in the dirt, and then you flood it, and they hatch, and you just drain it, and you end up with these giant crawfish. Do they taste the same as the river crawfish?
I haven't actually tasted the terrestrial ones are kind of new. Like Georgia gets new species every once in a while. Like armadillos are not native here, yet we have a fair population of them now. Um, a thing that's going on the news, and you can Google it after we get done talking. There's some kind of tree frog that is as big as a adult hand that is invading Georgia right now.
Hmm.
Um, and they're like cannibalistic towards other tree frogs.
Oh yeah.
So they're like eating our natural tree frogs and killing them off. And
Pretty
we just
nuts,
have
man.
there's species like that constantly in Georgia.
Well, I know up here they're talking about trying to kill off some of the owls because back in the '90s and the early 2000s there was a big hubbub about the spotted owls, and so we changed the way we do everything as far as logging and our national forests. Well, now the screech owls are out competing them, and
Huh.
so the basically whatever work we did to bring them back is going away, and so now they're thinking about thinning out that population. Which owls have always been something that you're never allowed to hunt or harvest, birds of prey, for whatever reason.
Oh, I'm gonna regret telling you this story. Do you know about the owl story?
I don't think so.
Okay. I was in Atlanta and had some mild intoxicants. I'm not gonna say which. Um, a friend of mine who lives in Atlanta also had some. It was past dark, so you can't see anything. Now, I'll just go ahead and say I was tripping, but I hear this noise, and apparently later on I found out it was owls in the trees, but it sounded like monkeys. Like legitimately, it sounded. Even my friend was like, "Yeah, you're right. They do sound like monkeys." But in an instant, my mind flipped to the worst case scenario, and my mind was just like, hey, there's monkeys in those trees that escaped from the zoo.
Oh
And
yeah.
the Atlanta Zoo is literally like 2, 3 miles away. They escaped. And then my brain went to the darkest place possible and was like, "You remember that news article about that monkey ripping that dude's dick off?"
Or faces. Chimps rip off
Yeah,
faces, bite off faces.
but yeah, I thought that, and I didn't even explain anything to my friend. I just in the dark in Atlanta, walking around the street, I just turned to him and I was like, "We need to leave, monkeys." And when we
Yeah,
got
that went over well, I bet.
when we got back, I explained everything. He's like, "Nah, dude, that was owls. I know what you're talking about because I know the sound you're talking about, but it was owls." And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah, we all think that they just sit there and go, "Whoo, whoo, whoo, whoo,
no,
whoo." No, no, there's some really freaky, scary sounding, like, the ones out here, you'll be out at night and you'll just hear this. You're
yeah."
like, "What? What was that?"
Well,
And
this
you
one was
can't
like,
hear owls fly. So, like, you'll hear it here, and then you'll hear it over there, and you're like, "Oh, they're everywhere. Oh my god, they're everywhere." But owls literally make no sound when they fly, and you can't hardly see them at night, and so, like, they sound like they're everywhere. I can never spot them with a flashlight.
yeah, and I'm not supposed to be afraid of owls because my grandmother, who grew up on a farm, actually found barn owls and raised barn owls. Like she
Hmm,
had pet barn owls.
hmm.
So it's in my blood to be able to work with them. But that was scary, man. I genuinely was like covering myself up. I didn't want nothing ripped off. Just
I don't know,
uh,
after watching that video where they tried to record sound of those things flying, and they say, "Just imagine if there was one with a 20-foot wingspan. You wouldn't hear it coming. It would you would just be gone." Like,
yeah.
that freaked me out. So I was like, "Alright, alright. It's something to be afraid of. New fear, giant owls."
And they existed at some point. They had to have.
Yeah, you'd think. I mean, everything was bigger at one point. And not everything is retained in the fossil records. It's pretty interesting how we catalog species based off of the fossils we find. I would be really interested to know, like, what percentage of modern species are in a position to be fossilized. Like, currently, right now, we could be running surveys. Let's see, like, is it 100% of the species on Earth, or is it like 0.05% of the species living on Earth being preserved currently?
Yeah, it could be a very small amount without us even realizing it.
Like,
Uh,
how big is our window into the past, really?
Probably a lot smaller than we realize relatively. You know what I mean? Um, when we think about it, it's until you think relatively, all numbers just kind of seem jumbled.
Right. Well, we think in terms of human lives, and that's a very poor judgment of time, because relatively we live such a short life. I mean, compared to, look at the reign of the dinosaurs measured in millions of years, and just instantly thinking about that just blows your mind. Like, we've been around how long in recorded history? It's not as thousands, it's not even hundreds of thousands, like,
Yeah,
so imagine millions. Like, that's just nuts.
it is, man. Another thing, I'm going to tell you one more little story. Did I tell you about what my ex said at the museum? One of my exes?
I don't think so.
Oh, good God.
Sounds juicy though.
Man, we were looking at uh, dinosaur fossils and stuff, and she just turns and looks at me and says, I don't believe in this. And I was like, "Oh, you mean they're not real fossils, that they have the real ones put away somewhere?" And she's like, "No, I don't think fossils are real." And I was like, "What?"
Interesting. I've not heard that one before.
Yeah, and she was like, "I think they made it up, and it's just like their way of looking smart so they can control us." I was like, "The dinosaurs want to control us?" Like, I genuinely, in the moment, was flabbergasted. I was just
Like,
like,
wait, what?
who would want to? What?
Right. Well, you know what? You gotta at least give her some credibility. Perhaps the theory is that all the dinosaurs headed east and fell off the side of the earth. years ago. That's
Yeah,
why there's no fossils.
that sounds about like something she would say. Uh, I don't know if you know what this phrase means in the North, but God bless her.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, God
no.
bless
Ironic.
her.
God bless your soul, honey.
Yeah, got a lot of that when I was little. Bastards.
Did you? Troublemaker, huh?
Yeah, just a little bit. Just enough to keep things interesting.
Well, I that reminds me, speaking of troublemaking as a kid, maybe that's where I got my love for mushrooms. My brothers force-fed me some mushrooms when I was like 3 or 4.
Oh God,
So, yeah, I had to go to the hospital and have my stomach pumped. So,
I didn't know that. Oh God.
yeah, it wasn't anything harmful. But I mean, out here it could have been because we do have death caps. We have actual death caps that grow here, but they're
Yeah.
so ugly. Like, I don't know how anybody would look at them and be like, "Well, you know what? I take that back." Because there is one that looks almost identical to it that they say is like the tastiest mushroom out there. It's that green shit growing on it.
Uh,
Like here, it just to me it looks like a moldy mushroom because it's so wet that they have that greenish patch on top, so it doesn't look appetizing. But then I remember I actually saw a mushroom with that same green stuff somebody was eating.
Here they stay pretty white, and then they get that greenish hue all over them, but to a lesser degree. It's like not a
Hmm.
focused green on the cap. It's just like a pale, sickly green on the entire thing.
Hmm.
And when you look at it, when it's that sickly green, you can look at it and be like, "That's something fucked up."
Yeah. Do you know what causes the green?
I There could be a whole bunch of things. I want to say aminotoxins, but at the same time, it could
I
be.
kind of looked at it and thought that mushroom's growing algae, like it's got water on top. So that's kind of why I was curious, just if it was
Yeah,
something.
there's a lot of talk about color going on right now. Now that you mention it too, because uh, we're getting like green on a lot of active species and stuff.
Yeah.
There's a huge debate going on now that it's like blue filtering a certain way through the cell walls rather than it actually being
Hmm.
green. And then
Right.
people were like, "Well, what about the black and the gray and the this color and that?" That was what
Who knows?
Rockefeller had to say about it. He was saying it's probably just blue
It's just
filtering through cell walls.
well, I mean, he's done a lot more DNA and mass spec work on mushrooms than anybody I've seen or heard of. So, he would have a better idea what's in them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
he's
know a
done it.
lot of us theorize that they're different alkaloids potentially, but until we put it in front of somebody that can actually analyze it and say, yes, that's what this is.
Yeah,
It's like a
and
lot of stuff. Nobody does that kind of work. Like they do the clinical level stuff and then they do low level stuff, but nobody's like, hey, let's take these theories and run scientific tests and publish them to the general public, you know? Like let's tear apart these methods. Let's actually say that in fact spore to grain, this is what it does and here's the proof. Here's your spore cross, your ghetto cross, here's XYZ ghetto cross, and here's if it did or did not work and the results. I'd love to see stuff like that.
well, that's one of the things one of my buddies is working on is he's doing ghetto swabs, but he's doing it in a traceable way. So like he'll take a plate, right, and do a diagonal streak. And then he goes across and does horizontal streaks of a different strain
Oh yeah.
all the way down, and then only takes from where they meet, like only takes the first colonies from where they meet. And the way that he's kind of confirming things is he never mixes two that are have super similar characteristics. So like always at least one pigmented, one albino in the crosses. So if it picks up that pigment, you'll be able to tell.
Right. If you have a different the original shape of the no pigment mushroom and it's got pigment or vice versa, then you know that, well, you at least have a reasonable suspicion that you've crossed them.
Yeah, and you can't do that with blobs. Unfortunately, you do have to take them to a mono if you want to cross them. But even then, you can confirm it with crossing it with a non-blob if it
But
proves.
honestly, I think there's way too much focus on crossing things. Like we have so little information on the ones that have been around for a long time, and right now we're crossing them with everything. It's just like uh, the weed market. Like you can't go and get pot seeds from the OG strains. You can't. Like, I mean, you can get some good ones, but you can't go back 40 years,
You're not
50
getting
years.
original Chem Dog, like those
Not
strains.
easily. I mean, maybe you buy something that says it is. I don't know how likely you are to get those, but there's been so many crosses and hybridizations that the original traits are lost into history. And I think it's the same with the fungus, where we have this huge influx of people, and there's just so much going. Everybody wants to own their own cross, and you know, why does it have to be a cross? I guess that's what I was getting at, is why can't somebody just say, hey, here's my isolate, I'm going to call it what I want? Why do we feel the need to trace it back, and why do we feel the need to have it as a cross? It's like Pokemon, we got to catch them all.
Yeah, and there are like industry standards that are considered acceptable too. Like, for instance, say I gave something to you and you wanted to make your own isolate from it. What Dave Wombats told me, and I don't know if this is like everyone agrees to it or if it's just most. I know people he works with, at least like Nikki, Maiko, and Yoshi, and them agree to this. Is take it 3 generations from spore, and then you can call it your own.
Right. Well, basically stabilize it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
what you're stabilizing an isolate essentially at that point. 3 is like the minimum, I
yeah.
think, is what they
That's the
used to
low
use.
end.
Yeah. Yeah, anymore, like I think they do a lot more than that. But again, does it come down to science, or does it come down to experimentation and uh, repetition? I don't know. And is that process out there either? Like I don't know where to find how to stabilize. I know how to do it mostly in my head from bits and pieces, but that's another thing we need to see out there is a breakdown on the information on that stuff. It's probably out there. I just don't educate myself enough.
There's a couple of ways you can do it, and again, that's going to be a topic of contention for some people. Um, you can always back cross using spores. Like you could start from something from spore, take that sample, and do a Mondi cross and do recovery from something old. You can always just keep going from spore and isolating clones until you eventually get what you're going after, or you can literally go mono mono and start from scratch on both of them and do like as many permutations as you want, and you increase your likelihood with every permutation.
So when a mono and mono cross, do you still have to stabilize it, or is it at that point you're creating a new identity, a new genetic identity?
Yeah, it's a new cultivar.
Okay, cultivar, that's what you call it.
Yeah, it's not technically like a new species or anything. I guess you could call it a new strain, but
Well,
it
and that's something I've seen changing too right now is the terminology. Like strain used to be something that was shot down. If you called it a strain, people would hit you on Facebook and be like, "No, that's not what it is. It's a variety." But now we've got proper terminology coming in and rewriting some of that stuff.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes to like, let's see, like what's his name on Instagram? Machiavelli Maiko. The dude's been working on Louis Vuitton kind of lately. I don't know if you keep up with him.
Mm-mm.
And he has like 6 different Louis Vuitton phenos, And so the way that he explained it was like Bluey Vuitton is the cultivar, but Bluey Mac, all these breakdowns of Bluey is the strain of that cultivar, is what the way that he explained it. I don't know if that's
Interesting.
entirely correct, but with as many people having as much access to genetics these days, we're going to have to be able to differentiate between like this is a whole new set of genetics and
Right.
this is just a form of Yeti or this is just a form of this. And
Yeah, we
whew,
need our trees, like our branched tree to trace it down, figure it out. It's kind of like what we're talking about with all the crosses.
yeah, and I was talking to that guy, that Machiavelli, and he said he's going to start calling his strains uh, variations like you would something you found in the wild. So it won't be called Yeti; it'll be called Psilocybe cubensis variation Yeti or something, along those lines. Trying to
Right,
get it,
because they're not genetically diverse enough to be its own species, right?
yeah,
It's all one. I don't know what you call it. Is it a species or a
yeah. It's
genus?
it's a single species.
Yeah. Psilocybe is the genus. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's a lot of what the big talk on natalensis is going on right now. Natalensis is more closely related to cubensis than Mexicana is related to tampensis. So
Hmm.
Nat and Cube is closer related than the two biggest truffle producers out there.
Yeah, and they've crossed the gnats with cubes, right?
Yeah, Nats have been crossed with cubes. There have been no successful truffle crosses
Right.
so far.
Right.
But what I was discussing with somebody kind of recently was natalensis is probably divergent evolution from cubensis. It probably
That
at
would
some
make sense.
point they were the same thing and then they just split off from one another. And the reason, evolution happens so that you're better suited for your environment, right?
Right.
Well, natalensis is in South Africa. It's or is it it's part of Africa. I can't remember if it's South Africa or North Africa, but it has that really specific environment that it evolved specifically for. So if you take something that evolved for that specific environment and put it in an environment like our cultivators do cubensis, what's going to happen? It no longer needs to survive in that harsh environment. It's
Right.
going
It's going to do much better.
and eventually it's going to revert to a cubensis.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that.
That's what my thoughts are. Is we're putting it in cubensis environment, one that is good for cubensis. It no longer has that harsh things making it express differently. Over generations, it's going to start reverting.
That's true. Could it could evolve into its own thing as well. I would imagine it probably is relative to what you feed it too. Like right now, you would think it'd probably be more prone to taking on its natural food sources. Whereas the longer you run it next to cubes and on cube food sources, it's going to alter and and change again, kind of like what you're saying with the training to a grain source.
Yeah, and I think that's the main reason I'm thinking of that is because we're seeing a boom in natalensis genetics right now. Like even not the interspecies hybrids, but like you've got green cap, black cap, uh, the squat, like a whole bunch of different stabilized genetics are popping up. Uh, who did I see with the black cap recently? I think it was Digi. Digi
It's an
has.
interesting theory, because that's very similar to what happened with the original homestead, right?
Mm,
And the McKennas went down to South America, brought it back, and it no longer was in that environment and mutated or changed to being here, and that's why we ended up with so many different varieties. And maybe that's what happens. So you get new mushrooms out, new cultivars out, and you get all these genetic mutations to adapt.
yeah, and uh, Madden was also talking about it. A lot of people that have been working with like tat genetics for a while and stuff like that. They're starting to look more into wilds because those hold potential for stuff we haven't even seen yet by
Right.
engineering.
In the past, people ignore them because they look basic, but the reality is, like we've discussed, is it's genetically diverse. It's wild. It's got everything. It's it's out there, and it has the, I don't know what you want to call it, the like the refreshing genetics. It's like if you have a really small village of 20 or 30 people. If you live in that same place for long enough, you're all going to be, three armed, one
Yeah,
eyed people. You have to branch out and get that genetic diversity from the other ones.
yeah, man. And right now, all of the research is saying Australia has the most diverse.
Interesting.
Well, it's kind of like the Galapagos. It's out there by itself, isolated, so it makes sense.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of that too is the the nature of that environment is so different than here, and it's a lot harsher, and so people have not really, looked to function and survive off of fungus. And I
Yeah,
think more recently we've kind of put ourselves into that mindset, and like those guys that I see in New Zealand and they're in Australia, they come out with some crazy wood lover mixes.
yeah. That's another thing that's about to get crazy too. Those interspecies hybrids. Whew.
Yeah, well, I'll be interested to see what comes, both with where my college is going and where we go with this show. But we're at an hour and 30 minutes, so I think
Oh
we'll
yeah.
call it a success. Say that we felt comfortable, and now we just need to repeat this process with some guests. So if you find folks are out there watching, and some OGs, some folks in the community you'd like to know better, send them our way. We're going to be sending out some feelers and get some more folks in here, and hopefully get to producing more of these shows. We've kind of been slacking lately, but both of us are busy with our own individual projects and holidays, and those have passed for the most part. So get to rocking and rolling. All righty. Well, we'll talk to you later, my friend. It was a good show, and adios, folks. Make sure you check us out each week. We'll have some exciting guests. Check us out Saturdays, released first thing in the morning at 12 a.m. You can watch us anytime thereafter.